Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Audio Product Development Alliance. I'm Roger Shively from Shively. Market Development for the Bluetooth SIG. Welcome, Henry.
Thank you, Roger.
Hey,
Excited to be here.
yeah, good. And we are too excited ahead of you. And welcome back to Josh Toole, the CEO and Principal Engineer of Cloud to Ground. Welcome back to you, Josh. Good to see you
Yeah,
again.
thanks for inviting me.
Thanks for joining us here. Um, and on our side from the APDA, we have Dave Lindberg from DB Enterprises and the THD podcast. Welcome, Dave.
Good, good morning, everyone.
And also from LinkPlay, we have Steve Willenberg. So welcome to you, Steve.
Yeah, guys, I'm glad everybody's on the webinar. It's going to be an exciting discussion.
And thanks to Joel Martins from Audio Express, who is our media partner, and to Adam Levinson from Levinson Consulting. If you don't know anything about the APDA, the Audio Product Development Alliance is the only organization focused exclusively on audio product development education, providing current relevant content that can be experienced in person, live online like now, and on demand later. So combined with some valuable cross-industry knowledge sharing, the APDA serves as a networking hub for the audio industry, offering access to experts and colleagues for professional development. Here at the APDA, we come to learn about building relationships and better audio products. We talk about design, manufacturing, measurement, simulation, supply chain, automotive applications, headphones, earphones, wireless technology, and we even touch on some industry standards. So we'd also like to thank Spencer, who is producing us today and on this live talk. And we're recording this, so if you don't get a chance to watch all of it now, you can come back and check it out again on our YouTube channel. You can share it and like it there and join us often. And you can request to join the APDA LinkedIn group that we have going on if you want to. And also we will be taking, requests and comments and questions in that group today, as well as on the YouTube channel chat. So keep that open, and we'll keep checking on any comments that may come up there. So with no further ado, let's begin with you, Henry. I was going to say let's start talking about the Bluetooth SIG, but let's go back to what you just finished up with an event in Shenzhen, and tell me a little bit more about what was going on there and any anticipated upcoming updates to the larger number of manufacturers. Were there any reactions from Shenzhen that you'd like to share with us as well?
Yeah. Just recently, about 2 weeks ago, we had a Bluetooth Asia. This is one of the major events in China that we're bringing in all our, ecosystem members, the community, to drive the awareness and the excitement about Bluetooth technology. China is a big market for us. About over 1/3 our members, solutions, and companies are coming out of China. If you look at the Bluetooth chipset alone, major of the chipset companies are from China and are driving a lot of the innovation. And we had a great success. We have about over 4,200 visitors, 60 exhibitors, over 50 plus speakers in the event. So that was a very successful event in China, and we're glad that the community was there and our members are there to showcase a lot of the new and exciting new Bluetooth feature, recent enhancements, technology, and advancements that are going on with the Bluetooth.
So it was a pretty positive event, of course. I think you've been very busy. You're going to keep busy too, talking about the Bluetooth SIG. Maybe give us a little bit of a background of what it is. And it's a special interest group. That's what SIG stands for.
Yeah.
And then that increasing support that you're talking about for developers. Just tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure. We're a non-standard, standard development organization. We're a community of, inventive companies and people collaborating to fulfill the essential need to connect, right? Together, we advance, protect, and promote the Bluetooth technology. Really, if you look at the Bluetooth SIG, we have three pillars. One, the specification, working with member companies to drive adoption, new specification. Two, the qualification, working with member companies to ensure that the specs are developed to, the products are developed to the specification to align for, driving interoperability. And the third is really promotion, right? So working with member companies to drive their awareness, understanding, and adoption of Bluetooth technologies.
Great. So did you talk about Bluetooth 7 during the Shenzhen event?
So we don't we talk about new enhancements. So when you look at new enhancements, there's a couple of new enhancements, right? The recent enhancement, Auracast is one of them. That's audio sharing to many devices. Device networking is another enhancement. Talking about standardization in lighting, HVAC control, ESL, secure fine ranging with channel sounding. So this is very importance to automotive industry for usage in terms of digital keys in automotive. And then recent enhancements such as ultra low latency with HIT device bring wire performance to HIT device such as mouse and keyboard to enhance the user experiences.
Okay. So in all of that,
Just
go ahead, Dave.
out of
Go ahead.
curiosity, is so the coalition or the SIG, there must be influential members that kind of help map out the roadmap, like what's important to your biggest partners. Is there like by committee you come up with what the roadmap should be for new standards, or how does that work?
Yeah, so we have a working group framework. So we have these working groups that get together on a weekly basis to discuss plan for new spec development. There's a process for new spec development, right? Any of the member could propose new work proposal. You gather a couple alignments with a few companies to drive these new spec developments. So we have these weekly work group meetings for members to join, and then we also have a quarterly member summit, which everyone get together face to face to continue to collaborate to accelerate the collaboration and development of the spec work. So given any time, we have over 50 new spec in the pipeline, in the process. So there's a lot of work going on. And we have different work groups from core working group to also industry working groups such as automotive, mesh working group, etc., audio working group, and so forth.
And Henry,
then
is there any fee that's associated with the participation or the participants, or is it just everybody is trying to, promote, better features, better technology? Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah. So usually it's for companies, right? So there are different tiers for member companies. There's adopter tiers where the bottom tier is free. So we do have a free tier for membership. Then we have an associate membership where there's certain fees, but you get to work in these working groups. So you're involved heavily with spec development. You're able to influence the industry, influence the long-term roadmap of Bluetooth, where people want to be in the working group and be able to contribute to a working group.
Okay. So do you see manufacturers embracing Auracast at the moment, or
Yeah.
as well
And we
as
also
indirectly
recently
only
this year. Oh, sorry. Let me go back.
Oh, go ahead.
This year
No,
we
please.
also added the contributor adapter membership. So these are a new tier of a membership, mostly for maybe newer companies or companies that have are producing like one or few products where
Okay.
the cost to join these working group are much lower than, larger companies that are producing, massive SKUs of, Bluetooth products.
So first-time adapters, you get a
Yeah.
little bit of a break on the entrance. Yeah. So in terms of manufacturers, though, do you see that there is a lot of embracing of Auracast and indirectly also the LE audio? Is that something that is going on in your perspective?
Yeah. So speaking of Auracast, I'm fortunate to be able to kind of, see that journey, right? When we kind of started a couple of years ago, when we were talking about Auracast, and let me step back. I'll just kind of
Yeah.
talk to the audience. What is Auracast? So Auracast
Yeah,
is
that's a
a
good
new
point.
Bluetooth capability, right? That allows a Bluetooth device to transmit audio to an unlimited number of audio receivers within range. So this is a new capability that came out, a couple years ago. I remember early in the days where first question I asked, like, hey, where could I buy these products? Where can I see these products, right? Now, early in the days, there wasn't much products, but today, if you look at the momentum from a product adoption, pretty much all the major companies have Auracast products. These are, you name it, from Samsung, JBL, Sennheiser, some of the TV manufacturer, right? So Android has adopted Auracast into their framework. So major TV manufacturer from Samsung, LG, Hisense, TCL, all have Auracast integrated into the TV. But for those of people who want Auracast and doesn't want to, replace their TV at the moment, we know TV cycles roughly about like 7 to 8 years. There's, devices out there like TV streamers or dongles that you could buy connected to your TV or any device. It could be a PC, it could be a speaker to have Auracast capability.
Okay, so that's Auracast, which was a good point. We should maybe explain that. So, and it started, I think it's been primarily in hearing aids to begin with, to a certain extent, but has expanded into different products as well. And so you see other manufacturers grabbing on and seeing the potential for integrating Auracast into their products, and that includes the Bluetooth LE, which is the low energy Bluetooth. At least that's what it stood for. Or maybe there's more explanation of what is being adapted right now and what you see coming up in the future.
Yeah. So one of the major use case for Auracast is assistive listening, right? So
Right.
Roger, you mentioned about hearing aid. So a couple years ago, the major hearing aid came to the SIG asking, hey, we need a standard, right? We need a global standard, because there are fragmented proprietary implementation out there with hearing aid. So what came out of that was basically the LE audio framework. This is the next generation of, audio for the next, 25 years of innovation, because the classic audios have been really stretched to its limit. And we see a lot of people are doing proprietary things on the Bluetooth classic audio. And with the LE audio as a new framework, that drives a lot of, flexibility and innovation for the next 25 years. So some of the key things that came out with the LE audio is one, compatibility with hearing aid, right? So all the hearing aid companies are using LE audio, so have global interoperability for the user. So if a hearing aid user don't have to lock into a proprietary implementation and so forth. So this allows a lot of flexibility and choices from a user standpoint. It also brings in the new codec, the LC3 codec. So it's a lower power, better quality, audio quality, lower latency codec. And then the third thing is obviously Auracast, right? The broadcast capability of LE audio. So besides the hearing aid companies who's adopting this into all their hearing aid moving forward, you have a lot of the handset companies, the phone companies. You have speaker companies like JBL have these speakers that does broadcast, headphones, earbuds, TWS. So a variety of Auracast form factor. I was actually on a webinar from another company that does conference room speakers, if you will, or microphone arrays and speakers, the design. So they're using Auracast to broadcast audio to people in like universities and higher educations, right? To allow, anyone, regardless of, hard of hearing or different levels of hard of hearing, be able to hear the lecture, hear the speaker or professor, to allow audio accessibility for everyone.
Okay. And maybe we'll bring in Josh. I mean, Cloud to Ground, we would just recently talk with Josh about some of that. Cloud to Ground is a company that is integrating and helping developers integrate Bluetooth LE and Auracast. So, the question is, what it started with assisted hearing, and but clearly, as it's evolving, it's becoming, more of a mainstream audio device use. I think is what we're just hearing here. Is it consistent with what you know? And I open that up for Steve and Dave as well. I mean, everyone's working in this industry. But go ahead, Josh. What do you think? I mean, and plus maybe some of the background on what these new codecs are would be helpful, and in ranges perhaps as well for what's useful and practical.
Yeah, it certainly, as Henry said, we see a much broader adoption as, the hearing assistance industry kind of driving this space, but now really opening up to additional use cases. And we're really excited about that market growth, right? As you start to see this in more devices, it drives demand for additional source devices and streaming devices. So we think that is going to be kind of an exponential growth, right? As we see that adoption move forward. Yeah, range. We talked about range last week, and I didn't have the numbers in front of me. So we're seeing about 250 meters range with our solution, and I've heard numbers much higher. I mean, I think it is. We see that continuing to move forward as a broadcast solution. Obviously, it's great if you can cover a lot of space with a single broadcaster, right? And that'll help with large installations. So.
Is that a special like high output radio to get that? Like what's the dBFM to get 250 meters? That's outstanding.
Yeah, so
it's a stadium, yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so our solution uses a Nordic chip, and it has a FEM module, a front end module. So that includes a power amplifier and a low noise amplifier, and a tuned external antenna. So definitely a high performance design right at the edge of regulatory
What's
output.
legal.
But
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, Dave, and if you need to cover even wider than 250, a larger stadium, you could put multiple transmitters to deploy at the venue.
That's good.
Henry, maybe I don't know how much detail you can share in some of this stuff. I don't want to ask too much inside baseball questions, but I think there's some new standards coming up to help for larger installations and multiple transmitters. Is that something you can share?
Yeah. So like I mentioned earlier, there's probably over 50 specifications that's ongoing at their working group at any given time. So there are developments that's going on to come out with a standard way to kind of do multiple transmitters, right? So there are proprietary ways of doing this, but we really want to standardize it, have a global standard, and so everyone could work off it. It makes it easier for most companies, so they don't have to focus their engineering resource on proprietary implementation and just kind of use the standards. So there's work going on to kind of help to do a smooth transition from like one transmitter hand off to another transmitter with the receiver. So when they're listening to the audio broadcast, if you continues to walk away, let's say in a stadium, you're sitting in the seat and using Auracast to listen to a like a different language, for example, and then you walk up your seat and go to grab a popcorn or a hot dog or a drink or somewhere. So you don't want to kind of lose the audio feed, and you want to kind of have a seamless way of covering that. Another example is like larger transit venues like airports, right? So going from one gate to another, right? Obviously with one transmitter, it won't cover the whole airport, right? So you might, their airport venue and transit venue might have to set up multiple transmitters. And then how do we have a standard way of, have a smooth transition for the people to, as they move along, roam along the different, gates or terminals to have a consistent user experience.
I have go ahead, Dave. Yeah.
I was gonna say what. So I've done headphones before for like silent disco and for F1, where they use FM radio stuff, and there's always like interference issues. What happens in a dropout? Does it is there does it adjust the compression for better quality of service in these kind of tough to service applications? Like what happens when you go from edge to edge of
Yeah,
transmit
I mean,
zone?
quick question. So, think of a Auracast like I think of an analogy as like a mini FM radio tower, right? Or AM
Right.
radio tower. And then,
Mhm.
so the tower, as I think of that as a Auracast transmitter, so just broadcasting audio. And then think of your Auracast receiver as let's say the car, the speaker in your car, right? And then think of the assistant, Auracast assistant. So there's three roles in Auracast, right? And three major function: Auracast transmitter, Auracast receiver, and Auracast assistant. And the Auracast assistant's really there to, when there's multiple transmitters or broadcasts, allows the user to kind of discover the different broadcasts and select which one he or she wants to listen into. Once the user select the broadcast, the audio goes directly from the transmitter to the receiver. It doesn't rely on there's no intermediate um, relationship with the assistant. So assistant's just there to help. So then you could think of the assistant analogy as the radio in your car, right? So as you drive, you could select which channel, but then we all have done this, right? Where we commute, do a long drive, when we drive further
Yeah,
away, what happened to the AM radio, the radio station we're
yeah,
listening to? Things start
yeah.
like dropping off. So in
You go
Bluetooth,
to the
we
next
have these
town.
what we call retry or retransmit. So we send them
Yeah,
all
yeah,
packet
yeah.
out, right?
Packet
The
resend,
receiver
yeah.
side, and Josh, you could probably talk better to this. On receiver side, you could they have packet reconstructions. I forgot the technical term, to kind of
Yeah,
build these packets. But eventually, it's physics, right? After a certain point, if you don't have another transmitters that kind of overlap the coverage,
yeah.
you are going to lose, audio and packet. And then you can step back in. The same thing with the car. That you drive back in to the radius of the
Hmm.
radio station. You pick up the audio again, right? So very similar analogy.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think
I
Okay.
suppose a good
just
thing.
briefly.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, I was just going to briefly add to that. Everything Henry said makes a lot of sense, but one of the challenges, you mentioned like an adaptive scheme where you have broadcast, you really can't have this kind of adaptive adjustment of the rate because you're only transmitting in one direction, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that adds a challenge. You don't know what the receiver received or didn't, right? The transmitter's just transmitting. So as Henry mentioned, we have schemes where audio data, it can be repeated. So when you're configuring that broadcaster, you can say, well, okay, if I want to maximize the reliability of the link, I'll repeat that audio data multiple times in the stream, and I'll space them out in both time and frequency. So now I increase the odds that my receiver can reconstruct the audio data. And then the receiver also will have packet loss concealment algorithms, so that if you lose a single frame of data,
Right.
lose a single block of audio, you can at least smooth that out and you don't have like a discontinuity in the signal. But that the ability to send multiple instances of the data really helps with that. And then I think where we go to larger installations, it's a lot like Wi-Fi, right? We early in Wi-Fi's deployment, you saw where you might have spotty Wi-Fi in one part or another part of a facility or building, and then over time,
Yeah.
people kind of learn how many access points do we need? How do we place them so that we get that coverage? And so hopefully then with multiple transmitters, that will eliminate that issue of, sort of marginal performance at the edge.
Uh,
And
uh,
Roger, back to your point earlier, like, so when you think about Autocast, it's really like three major use cases, right? One, like
mhm.
be able to share your audio. Two, like unmute your world. And three, hear your best. What I mean by unmute your world is like when you go to like airports or bars, you usually have these like silent TV just sitting there, right? So a lot of people are just
Yeah,
watching the video. Wouldn't it be cool to be able to pick up the audio directly to your, hearing device? Could be hearing aid, earbuds, headphones,
exactly.
etc.
Yeah, yeah. That was kind of the question I was going to ask about too, but you answered it pretty almost in advance is that, say I'm walking through an airport, I can choose my channel, or if, in theory, I can choose my channel because I don't know if there's such a thing as been implemented yet, but I could choose my channel, or there could be different sources available to me in an airport. Maybe it's just all the silent CNN TVs or whatever they are. But is that something that's feasible, or is that just too futuristic at this
No,
point?
so there's a lot of opportunity for Auracast, right? When you talk about airport or transit
Lounges,
venues.
yeah.
So opportunity like the silent TV, right? So
Yeah,
to your point, the CNN TVs that we all see in airport, even digital signage, right? Well, I mean, how many times we walk
exactly.
by and we see these digital signage with cool graphics and stuff? Wouldn't it be cool if you walk close enough and then you could pick up the audio, right?
That's what I was thinking about. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean it's very science fiction, but not really, not anymore.
And just FYI, I don't know if people are aware, the Frankfurt airport actually has a Auracast deploy early this year. I think it's been going on for I think it's 3 months and 90 days, or I gotta check. So actually at gate, again, I gotta remember gate, don't quote me on this, gate 17, 18,
Okay, all
two of the
right,
gates has a Auracast at the Frankfurt airport. So
okay,
actually it's a funny story. February I was at ISE, Integrated Systems Europe. On my way back, I actually I had to do a stop at Frankfurt. So I did go to those two gates, but there wasn't any flight there, so obviously there wasn't any announcement. But I did take my phone out. I have one of the Samsung phone, and I scanned for it, and I do see the broadcast name with the two gate on it. But unfortunately, there wasn't any flight going on. Couldn't hear the people announce
well,
speaking.
but your point, you were at ISC, so that kind of opens a question up. It's like Bluetooth is now being more and more accepted into some of the more, and maybe done not high end at ISC, but there is high end things. And I also know that Bluetooth will be talked about in Vienna in June, because that's where the high end show is this time. It's become something that goes into high end. I mean, it's being accepted by more and more manufacturers in terms of this is quality stuff, or it can be quality stuff. Is that what your impression is and your perspective on that as well? Are you saying
Yeah,
that it's
I think so, like maybe we'll touch about this later when we talk about we have a roadmap, right, for
oh yeah,
lossless and lossless audio, right? So when we talk about high end in that case, lossless audio is one of the stuff on the roadmap that will be coming out probably early 2027.
okay.
But I think
Well,
sorry.
no, go
A
ahead. No,
lot of in terms of Auracast, a lot of the drive I think is associated with the assistive listening, right? Putting these implementation into infrastructure, into venues and deploying the venues.
okay.
I actually was on a webinar with PAMA, the
Hmm.
Professional Audio Manufacturer Association, I believe.
Yeah.
Really, if you look at LE audio and Auracast, I think in the future, all audio, speakers or public, anywhere location that has a public announcement or a sound system, should have Auracast in place in terms of audio accessibility, right? So there's huge opportunity for the market, for the developers. And then when you talk about location momentum, we already see there's thousands of locations across 18 countries that has deployed Auracast at locations. So this is also driving people who want to have Auracast devices to go to these locations to experience Auracast and
Okay.
the performance, right? So theaters, higher education, performing art, stadiums, etc.
That means
Henry,
that, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
the SIG has a database, is that right? That they track installations. You can register an Auracast transmitter.
Yeah, so we do have an internal database, internal tracking, but we has actually have a website, we have a page called Auracast Location Profile. So this is a site that people could go to see some of the, it's almost like a case study, where Auracast is deployed at these certain types of locations. And the reason we don't have a public database because one of the challenges getting these Auracast locations registered with us. So like I mentioned, there's probably thousands of Auracast locations today. But getting these venues to kind of even just register with us is a challenge that we're looking into to kind of resolve because we want to provide general public information as much as we can to show, hey, these are all these locations where you could go to experience Auracast, especially for people who are hard of hearing or hearing aid user or cochlear implant users.
Okay.
About
Well,
logo and the QR code, or is there still a QR code option for Auracast broadcasts?
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways to discover and join Auracast. One of them is using an Auracast assistant device to kind of scan, and then you see the broadcast, and then you kind of click on it. There is a standard to use a QR code, so that spec is adopted already. I think it came out last year, I believe. So there's a standard way of structuring the QR code where people could take the phone and just take a picture. And then it'll provide, the broadcast name, the broadcast ID, all the metadata to your Auracast enabled hearing device to receive the broadcast.
okay. Quick, so all these products are starting to exist. That means chip manufacturers and SoC companies, they're stepping up with these Bluetooth updates. That's how they're being made available. I mean, I think, Josh, you're aware of that perhaps as well. But from Henry, from your point of view, do you have any, are there new solutions that maybe you've already talked about them just now? These are the new solutions because it's being put into these SoCs and chip manufacturers. They're genuinely embracing it, it sounds like, and it's part of our future product development then. Is that right?
Yeah, so I encourage developers to either go to our website, Bluetooth.com, look at all the specs. So all the adaptive spec is there. We also post board approved draft spec, right? So specs that's close to adoption. We do a draft version that we publish them to make sure the ecosystem are aware of what's coming next. And also, I encourage people talk to their silicon provider. So again, a lot of these silicon provider chipset companies that you mentioned, Roger, they're sitting on these working groups and are developing these specifications. So they go and do these process, and once the spec is adopted, a majority of the chipset company will have solutions that support these, and will be able to qualify their chipset to these specification. So as a developer, as an end product user or manufacturer, they could work with their solution provider or chipset provider to take those and implement it into their product for go to market.
Okay. And Steve, you're with WIM. How do I qualify? You're a streamer. You're a product
Yes, we
developer.
are.
So, but
Wi-Fi.
you're clearly interested in this concept. I'm imagining.
Yeah, oh, for sure. From a product perspective, as we talked last week, it's exciting. The capabilities and the products that can be developed around the platform are really, very, very exciting to see. And, obviously, as this unfolds, from a consumer perspective, people are going to get more and more comfortable with it. So, I think overall, this is just going to be a very big growth area, as it migrates from the commercial space into the home and into the car, into the, a variety of different locations. One question I've got for both Josh and Henry is obviously the disruption in the memory, in the industry as far as, chip prices and, pricing, really, really being hammered. How does that affect the products that, we're talking about here? I mean, are they going to be affected by all the disruption in the memory side of things?
Well, I can't comment. I can't comment on pricing. That that's really up to the chipset companies. Um,
Yeah, but do you see
I'll-
disruption, I guess, is more of a general comment.
Yeah, I would say we certainly see part availability challenges, right? And I think it's not so much that the parts we are buying are the same ones that are used for AI, but they're moving production over, to prioritize the AI side. So we found we had to move to a different flash chip on our board simply because we couldn't get the one that we had originally
Mhm.
designed in. So yeah, still so some parts availability challenges for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, people are trying to find a way. It just there again, it's a bit of disruption, and that just causes a flow through the supply chain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But overall, Roger, to your point, from a product perspective, we see, and we're actively at WIM looking at this technology and the various things that we might be able to do in terms of bringing it into our product line.
Yeah. And I think you talk about roadmap, Henry. One of the things, maybe you can start expanding on that just a little bit. What's in that roadmap that's coming up? Not just for Bluetooth lead audio, but I know we were talking about it briefly before, the Bluetooth High Data Throughput and what that means, and has high resolution support, and does that, I think it means multi-channel potentially as well, and something like that would improve some of those Auracast capabilities. Maybe you can expand a little bit on what the roadmap is looking like in the
yeah,
next.
sure.
And how long does the roadmap last for you? Is it a 6 month look? Is it a 12-month look? Or how far out are you looking for some of this?
Yeah, so we have a cadence right now of like 6 months that we release a core spec update, right, to the general public. So and it depending on when the spec is completed, and we'll go into one of these buckets. So again, there's probably over 50 specs that's going on right now. I'll just kind of touch on the major enhancement on the upcoming enhancement. So there's a couple of them. One is like I mentioned earlier, the high data throughput. That's expected to be adopted by later this year, 2026. So the high data throughput project is a feature that will enable a new generation of Bluetooth solution. So basically, it'll increase the bit rate up to 7.5 megabit per second. So what that means is increasing the pipe, because right now Bluetooth LE is at 2 megabit per second. So you almost get almost a 4x the improvement. So it will deliver significant wireless performance. It will increase the existing Bluetooth use cases and application. Will enable and this high HDT or high data throughput project will enable application use cases such as lossless high res audio.
Wow.
And
So
how does
go
that
ahead.
how does it manage the coexistence issues where you're still going to be like a narrowband hopping solution to avoid interfering with Wi-Fi and other devices, or does that change as well?
Oh, that doesn't change. It's still still on the 2.5, but I believe the with that pipe, with the larger pipe, the distant, and Josh, you correct me if I'm wrong, the distant decreases, so it's a little trade-off.
Yeah, maybe Josh or even Steve. I don't know, Steve, it sounds like you might be interested in this. Well, I mean, 7.5. What does that mean to you, Josh? Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean,
Certainly
certainly a lot more capacity, right? Yeah, I mean, and as Henry, just to kind of touch on that last point, there already are multiple PHYs for LE. So we have what's called coded PHY, which is a long range, lower data rate PHY. There's 1 megabit and 2 megabit. So this will add new PHYs, and the infrastructure in LE is already there to manage that exchange. So devices sort of negotiating the PHY or selecting the right PHY for a particular application. So backwards compatibility kind of baked in from the beginning, with the ability to support, devices that may not have the new capability. And then, as Henry mentioned, some trade-offs with range. That's always true.
But it does mean high resolution audio over, seven
Yeah,
and a
probably
half megabit.
multi-channel.
Yeah.
That's the other part too, is this is multi-channel. So we're talking about genuinely a wireless multi-channel
Dolby
setup.
7.4.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of options there, right? You can do more streams of, medium quality, which is today medium quality is quite good.
Mhm.
You can do fewer streams of very high resolution or lossless audio.
Yeah.
You also could do, multiple languages, right? So maybe now you're carrying more streams where you have 5 languages, instead of just 2 languages or 3 languages that might be possible. So there's a lot of different ways you can use that bigger pipe, right?
Yeah.
When you get a bigger pipe, then we can start to play with a lot of variations on that.
Yeah, and that's
Reliability, another one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it just opens up, as you said, it becomes a product development team, they get to play in the sandbox at a lot greater depth and height, if you will. And for people that are developing products, that's a really positive thing. Because it gives them choices. And, again, as all people are bringing products into the consumer base, you want to have those choices. You don't want to overwhelm people, but, from a user experience perspective, if you build and develop products, targeted at that user experience, and you have some of these choices, it's just going to be a much more compelling product, for those consumers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we talked a little bit last week about the SIG has built these building blocks, right? And these great building blocks that start in the core, and
Mhm.
stuff like HDT will be a building block that then all the higher level profiles can build on, right? So there'll be other ways that the individual higher level profiles use that new core technology, and product manufacturers can innovate as well.
I guess there's a question that came up just now. What codec will be used in Bluetooth HDT? Is it FLAC?
Yeah, so we haven't announced that yet. So
Oh,
the HTT project is a capability, a high data throughput, but the codec, we will have a codec for the high res and lossless audio. We haven't announced it yet. It is a well-known, established market codec. So that's soon to be announced.
okay. The group will have to wait, but it's out there. So it's clearly in the short term, and even in this 6 months roadmap that you just talked about, which has HDTV, high resolution capabilities, and then all these multi-channel features. What does that lead to next then? And can you see the next 6 months after the next 6 months? Can you see that far out?
Yes. So HDT, the project, the framework, will be available later this year. I think the high res and lossless audio probably early 2027, along with some of the LE audio enhancement that we talk about of a standard way of roaming for larger stadium, larger spaces, some of the multi-channel, and then ultimately going to a higher band. So I think this is something we announced, the SIG announced a couple years ago, going into a higher band, meaning 5 gig and 6 and beyond, right? And this is to help, Dave, you were talking about potential congestions with Wi-Fi and 2.4, right? 2.4 is a 2.4 gigahertz is very crowded at times, right? In spaces. So Bluetooth will be moving on to a higher band at 5 gig and between 6 gig and beyond to alleviate some of these congestions. So that's like a more long-term estimated in maybe second half of 2027.
Yeah, that could get into some regulatory fun as which countries are 5.0, 5.8, and
Yeah,
all the
yeah,
other.
and we've been
ISM
working with the
bands.
regulatory bodies. We also have been working with also Wi-Fi to make sure there's, coexistence with other technologies.
That's a whole interesting thing, is like the ability
Yeah.
to sync between two different radios so you don't interfere within devices.
Exactly. Is that possible? I mean, I guess we solve all of our
I-
problems as soon as we make them, but
Uh,
if it's adapted and the infrastructure that's needed to coexist in a crowded market, and then what are the challenges and all that? I mean, can we solve those problems?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it already exists today, right? I mean, Wi-Fi also operates at 2.4, right? So,
Mhm.
the chipset guys, they're very smart and intelligent, clever, and they're coexisting between 2.4 today. So there's no
Yeah.
reason why, moving up to 5 gig, they couldn't do that.
Well, 5 gig requires you to have something there that's 5 gig. So that means we add capability, because if we don't have, I guess they already exist, but we're just going to
The
borrow
new
that
five,
bandwidth.
everything.
Yeah. So you're adding
New
infrastructure. You're
chipset.
adding. Yeah. You're adding.
There's a
You're
choice.
adding.
Yeah.
So that's the solution. You add, and then you solve the next problem after you've
Yeah.
added. Yeah. So okay. Um, so beyond that, is there anything else that's coming up for us that we should be keeping an eye open for in terms of, you said
No,
2027, so how far out can we think about?
yeah, I mean, those are the, key major elements, key major enhancements, that we have. There's other, minor, also minor improvement, other spec work that's going on. I encourage people who want, who want to be involved and want more detail, visit our website, join the working group, join the membership,
Yeah.
and just, have those collaboration, and for those people who want to influence the roadmap, or influence the direction of roadmap or feature capabilities, please,
That's good. Yeah.
please
There is a
be
question
part of
about,
the community.
there is a question related to 5 gig. Is 6 gig available?
That is on the outlook. We're taking one step at a time, baby steps. So I would want to get to the five gigahertz, and then
Yeah.
potentially 6.
Climb that ladder one step at a time. Yeah. Okay. All right. Um, anything else on you've got in mind, Dave?
I don't know. I always like how people want to go higher in frequency, but actually 2.4 is a better for avoiding physical
Interference.
interference.
Yeah, that's what I was going to
Yeah.
say. Because when you get up there,
Like
there's other
moves around
challenges.
shapes.
Yeah,
It's more like a
there's
laser beam at higher frequencies.
yeah, it's a
Yeah.
challenge, and I think that's something Josh probably has to worry about as well, because it's higher frequency, but things get in the way. So you just need more ways to get around the things that are in the way. So you need more equipment, basically. You need to bounce it around that tower that might be there. I think that's the problems we have even today. So we're just, we're just going to be climbing on board with something that we're trying to solve already. But yeah, if it makes sense, I mean, that if everybody goes to high frequencies and 2.4 just sits there, then, it's available. So as long as it's quality. Yeah.
And part of it is working with our community, right? With our community of members and companies to
Yeah. Yeah.
have these use case and application. Obviously, there's a demand for a higher band, because 2.4 is very crowded. And it makes sense, right? Because other radio, when you look at SoC, there's a lot of combo chips out there that are using Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. I think it makes sense to kind of be able to adaptively switch between different band for different type of usage, and based on the usage and the application.
Well, okay.
Yeah,
So
it's
go ahead, Dave. This is Josh. Yeah.
I was just going to say, it's again about adding to the toolkit and the building blocks, because I think there's some use cases where that'll be really valuable, right? When you have Bluetooth between a mobile device and headphones, and you want very high quality lossless audio, you're dealing with a very short range. And in that case, the performance characteristics of high frequency can be positive, right? I'm less interfering with people in the other room because my transmission is staying more local to where I am. So for some use cases, those become positives. For some use cases like Auracast, it may be better to stay at 2.4, where you're really prioritizing range and penetration.
I think this is a good question for you, Josh. If I wanted to start developing Bluetooth product now for HDT? Is there a way to do that? How would you start prototyping a product now for HDT? Is there a chip vendor out there, or is there some other member in the SIG that's available, or is it something that you can do right now in a prototype?
So there are companies that are previewing HDT chips. I can't speak beyond that to the specific availability, except to say I'm sure they're coming soon if they're not already generally available. Henry, you may know more about sort of availability level, but
Yeah, I think a lot of the chipset companies have capabilities with HDT. Obviously, it's not, since HDT is not adopted, they wouldn't be able to qualify, right? So if you're a manufacturer, developer, or product want to get ahead of time, kind of get that in sync, or work with, I would encourage them, you guys to work with your chipset providers, right? So most of the tier one or even tier two have HDT capability. They're working along with all the members in the working group in the spec. Since the spec is not adopted, whatever you're prototyping is not quote unquote officially, the qualified standard, but it is just as close as possible. Like once the spec
Okay.
is adopted, then you could just, qualify,
Yeah.
assuming the chipset.
So my
company.
next question is, Josh, is that what you're doing?
you mean, yeah, in terms of working with, yeah, these
Yeah.
early access? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our goal is always to get exposure to these new things, and we're working on the
Yeah.
spec side, the qualification
Yeah.
side,
No.
and practical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Do we
great.
want to talk a little bit about qualification? I know it's not something we've touched on a lot, but
Well,
if, new product companies coming into
yeah.
the space, this topic may be relevant.
Well, that's where I was going to get, because the SIG does work on certification and interoperability and so on. So maybe you guys can touch on that briefly, and then we can wrap up after. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I'll go and Josh, you could fill in. I think um, one of the misunderstanding from the market is when you're product companies, you there's a tendency to think, well, if I take a qualified Bluetooth chipset, I could just put in my product and then I could ship or sell, right? So our qualification process, they take that any product that a company makes needs to go through qualification. So when you think about like downstream, right? So like the stack has to go through Bluetooth SIG qualification. The chipset, right? Then downstream, the chipset guy or SoC, the chipset has to go through qualification. The SoC, who's taking different chipset, they have to go through qualification. And when they sell that SoC to let's say, that speaker that takes that SoC and put it in their loudspeaker, for example, that loudspeaker company needs to go through qualification. So any companies who's producing a Bluetooth solution or needs to go through qualification. So that's just kind of you have some of the misunderstanding companies from product companies where they think, oh, this chipset went through qualification, I could just put it on, implement it into my solution, and just kind of sell it. But they would need to go through qualification.
And that's a Bluetooth qualification, not an FCC issue.
Correct. That's a Bluetooth qualification for our members to basically use the IP, right? That we want to protect all our members who are using the Bluetooth technology. Correct.
Yeah, because I think maybe what some customers get confused is I believe you can get modular certification in the US for 2.4 RF, at least I'm sure Wi-Fi. I know Wi-Fi you can, but
Yeah,
maybe
that's
that might
the
be
radio. The FCC is a separate qualification. Yeah.
right. But yeah, modular. But that's US is the only one I think that does that. Anyways, I digress.
That's all
And
right.
that the testing that Henry mentioned that's done on the chip and the stack covers a lot of the tests that need to be done. So there's not necessarily a ton of testing that you need to do to get that final listing, but it is a process that we also run into that misunderstanding, right? Some product companies don't understand that they need to do that to put out a product.
Right. Yeah. They go to
And
the
it's
ODM
important,
and they go,
right,
sorry,
just
go ahead.
no, but yeah, what you said is right. Um,
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of value in this because Bluetooth, in my opinion, has been really successful because of its interoperability, right? It's important that manufacturer A and B, two products are built, they need to work together, and the user experience needs to be positive. So it's important that we have that testing to ensure that everybody is complying with the specification and doing things in the same way so that the user experience is good. And that's one of the big strengths of the Bluetooth SIG, that they've done an incredible job of that interoperability challenge, and that's really what makes Bluetooth so important.
And to Josh's point, interoperability, we have these during the spec process. We have like IOP for a lot of testing, right? Interoperability testing. We also, after the specs get adopted, there's what we call UPF. They also allow companies get together with their prototypes or end products to test against
Yeah.
each other to make sure there's robust interoperability across different platforms and
Yeah.
devices and
Yeah.
manufacturing and so forth.
Yeah. I've often heard brands that, like, if it's US launch Bluetooth speaker, they'll go, okay, is it Samsung, iPhone? What does it all work with very well? And they'll do their internal battery. And if different regions, like in France, if they use whatever they use there, they're always kind of testing it on their own to make sure it works.
Yeah, the Unplugged Fests are a fantastic resource at UPF that Henry mentioned. You can go and test with, 100 different companies building products, and you learn so much, right, about your product, about what works and doesn't, and it's a great experience.
Say that again,
Probably some
UPF.
great frustration moments too.
UPF.
It's
Yeah,
like, why is it
Unplugged
not
Fest.
working with this phone?
Okay.
Unplugged Fest, sorry.
Thank you. That's what I needed. Quick question, thing we didn't talk about, but Josh talked about before, antennas. They're kind of important for Auracast. There has to, you haven't mentioned it yet, but there is a need for an antenna design as well. And that came up, I think, when we talked last week. Anything that we want to maybe make sure everyone's aware of, and it's an important aspect, of course. Anything in general we want to mention about that before we move on? I'll leave that for you, Josh. So,
It certainly is important. My background is more software and stack, so certainly
okay.
there's people on our team that know that space better than I do.
Okay.
But there is innovation there. I just was having an interesting conversation about some more advanced techniques, and we're always looking at how to push that forward. But
Okay, good.
Yeah, Roger.
Go
Sorry.
ahead.
no, go ahead, Henry, please.
Oh, I'm not going to talk about antenna design because I don't have that background. But to your point, antenna is important, right? And not just to Auracast, it's just to all
Everything,
radio,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
But we've seen companies that are using antenna for Auracast purpose to kind of do a beamforming situation where they're broadcasting the audio to focusing in a certain area. So they're using like a beamforming antenna
Okay.
implementation to do that. So that
Making a zone,
antenna design
basically.
is important.
Creating a zone of
Yeah,
for-
exactly. So
Okay.
creating a zone where think about like museums, right? So you have like
Yeah.
different
As you move through, you
as
can.
you move to different painting, you kind of step in front of this painting,
Okay.
and then you're able to pick up the audio and then go to the next painting or what have you, to be kind of in that zone
Okay.
or
Oh,
the
good.
area spot.
We
Very
have
cool.
this question. We have one more question. When a Bluetooth product is described as class 1, what is the difference, and how does that apply to a Bluetooth HDT stream?
I and I'll start off, and maybe Josh, you could maybe add it. I noticed again, I'm not an technical expert in this. I know in the Bluetooth there's 3 different classes. I think there's a class 1, class 2, class 3 in the specification. Each of them I think provides certain power and range capabilities. So I think that's to the extent that I know from those class solution. But then to the second point of question is not um um I get to the second part. I don't know because I'm gonna look at the spec. I don't know how those are related to the HDT or to the high res lossless audio.
Okay. Can you answer the class 1, Josh, or do you know the answer to that one?
What I would say is just that the classes are related to the regulatory requirements.
Okay.
Unfortunately, the SIG won't be able to change those for HDT, right? So the
Got it.
same regulatory requirements will still apply, and HDT will just have to work within those existing classes.
Okay. And then this is a question I think you may have already asked. Can a Auracast transmitter be one way or only, or does it have to be a two-way with the receive path?
Yeah, it's specifically one way. Sorry, Henry, you can
No,
expand.
you're good. You're good. Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
Auracast broadcast is just one way. So the transmitter is just broadcasting one way. There's no, the transmitter does not know who or how many devices are listening.
Okay. Good.
But
Thank
maybe worth just clarifying for your audience that that's just one of many ways you can use LE audio. So Auracast is based on a broadcast transport layer called BIS, broadcast isochronous. There's also a connected mode that is bidirectional, right? So there's the capability
Okay.
to do connected, also allows you to do two-way adaptive rates. You can do security two-way. You can do bidirectional audio. So other modes of operation, but that's outside of what is Auracast, right?
Oh, okay.
Auracast is
Okay.
specifically broadcast LE audio.
Good question. Good answer. Thank you. Appreciate that.
And just for the audience, like Josh mentioned, LE audio allows people to implement a broadcast solution. What Auracast is a subset for defined requirement to meet this standard to identify yourself as an Auracast product or Auracast infrastructure location. But there are broadcasts out there. There's actually a conversation in the working group doing what they call like a voice chat broadcast. So think about you have, let's say, 5 people riding a motorcycle in helmets. They're using a Bluetooth broadcast capability to, when one people is talking in the helmet, the other 4 rider could hear it, and then when the other people speak, they hear it. So that way, that one is kind of like a two-way broadcast in a group environment.
No, I like that one. That's good.
Yeah, it's pretty neat.
I think we're gonna start to wrap up here. So I'm gonna say I know that where you're going. Hang on, one more question from a viewer. What is the difference between Auracast broadcast and audio share in Auracast?
Yeah, good question. So I think audio sharing is a terminology that I think some companies picked up, but really, I think we use audio sharing at the early beginning stage, but then before we had a branding or trademark on Auracast. So Auracast is the way to broadcast. Certain companies, they haven't used the right terminology. They're still using or I mean audio sharing as one of them. But we're talking to these member companies to making sure that we use a consistent terminology and a naming of brands. So from an end user standpoint, so it's more intuitive for them to relate.
Yeah, and I think if anybody has any questions later, we can always put a question or a comment on the YouTube channel, and we'll get back to you on it as well. But I appreciate it. I'm gonna find out where you're going to be in the near future. I think you're going to you're going to a sensors coverage, and then you have the World Congress on Audiology. Is that right, Henry?
Yeah. Well, I personally won't be at the sensors coverage. My colleagues will be there, but I'll be heading to the World Congress of Audiology to speak
in Korea. So okay, all right. And let's see what's going on here for us. We already mentioned the Vienna show that's coming up. APDA will be there. Is that correct, Dave?
I don't know. Not me. I'm going
Yeah.
to Computex in Taiwan, June
Okay.
2nd
All
to
right.
5.
Well, so the APD will be at the Vienna show. I'm positive about that. So we'll be there. And then one other thing we probably should share, because we love to share with our partners are doing, which is the Audio Engineering Society. So coming up in July, for those who work in automotive audio, there is a conference in Detroit coming up at the end of July, 29th, 30th, 31st. And they'll be there and you can come join. The content I'm told is extraordinary, and we're getting a lot of exhibits and attendees already. So please put it on your calendar if you have time to be in Detroit this summer. It'll be at the Huntington Place downtown. So please stop by. The APDA will also be there and talking about automotive audio. Appreciate all your time today, guys. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. And this has been a good one. I appreciate that as well. And we'll have you guys back, and maybe we'll get a check in on what's coming next in the next few months, Henry. And thanks again, Josh, for both of you guys' time today, and Dave and Steve. We appreciate all the work. The other thing I might mention is that we do want everyone to join us at the APDA. So I'll put a little advertisement out there for us again. Join us, become a member, become a sponsor. We are a nonprofit, and we do depend on our sponsors to help us keep going and to share this information with you. And you can join us to be a member, just to take advantage of that as well. So once again, thank you everyone for that, and I appreciate your time, and take care, everybody who listened. We appreciate that. If you have more questions, please put them in the comments on the YouTube channel and check it out as we go. We'll have some more things coming up in June, as well as those July events. So thanks, everybody, and have a good one. Thanks, Dave, Steve, Josh, and Henry. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
thank you.
Thank you, Roger.
Thank you, guys.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
and bye.
Take care.
Stay safe, everyone. Thank you. Bye now.
Okay.